As a PA, you will often be supporting someone in situations where maintaining privacy and dignity is critical, especially during personal care tasks or handling sensitive information. This module highlights the importance of respecting these needs while also establishing clear boundaries from the start to protect both you and your employer. We're first going to look at some key privacy concerns that you should be mindful of when supporting your employer and the strategies that can help with this. We'll also talk about how you can do this whilst not inhibiting their independence.
I think some of the key privacy and dignity concerns that a PA should be mindful is things like, for example, opening someone's post for them. A prime example where a letter may be marked private and confidential, but the person doesn't have the ability to open itself. So kind of being mindful about how you want to do that, how they best want to make that work, and then actually like what to do once maybe it's been opened and the person's read it. Like how do they put it away without like kind of like viewing it? I think the same could be applied when thinking about somebody using their laptop or their mobile phone and somebody being like, nearby and being able to see what's on the screen and those kind of things.
Well, I think everyone is different when it comes to privacy and dignity. And, people can change as well during their life. So when I first started using PAs, I was still able to do some things by myself. And as I've become less able to do things, I've changed how I approach certain things around privacy and dignity. So, for example, back when I could still do a lot of things myself, it was important that my kind of intimate areas that I could wash and dry these by myself, and I would keep a towel in place to protect my dignity. But as I became less able to do that, then I wasn't so worried about, keeping things hidden from my PAs. And so it changed for me. And I think, different people feel differently about what they think should be private. So I just think the advice for the PA is really just to talk to the employer about how they like to have things done. So I think what I've learned from employing PAs is that you can't anticipate every scenario when you're talking to PAs about what boundaries there might be. So it's really a continuous conversation that you have to have. And I think I have definitely left things for too long until I'm really annoyed by them, rather than addressing them right at the beginning.
Tim Kemp and Ross Hovey will now introduce some strategies which can help you to maintain privacy and confidentiality when undertaking certain tasks.
To just realise that, you're in a work environment and whatever happens in there is confidential.
Yeah.
You may get on really well, but it's still a working environment. So
asking questions. So how does the person want to be assisted? So like being really clear, like not assuming that they want to do it in a certain way. They might be actually comfortable with you opening it and reading it, but equally they might not be. So just asking what help it is they want. And then if they say, well, actually, I'd like that to remain private, it's things like, opening an envelope and then sort of like having the document facing away from them, maybe as you open it, holding it in front of them and saying, like, is that okay for you? And it might be that it's multiple pages and just thinking about not reading it and then putting it back away after that person's read it, and then potentially, putting that somewhere where that person stores it.
It's also important to remember that whilst ensuring privacy and dignity is respected, you must also ensure that this does not limit the independence of your employer. John Hastie and Ross Hovey share some examples of how this can be achieved.
So I think sometimes the PA needs to keep things private and allow me to make my own choices and to be independent. So as a PA, sometimes you might think that the employer should share information with somebody because it might help them, but the employer doesn't want to. So to give an example, I might really struggle to get up at 7 a.m. just because of my care routines. And my PA knows this, but I agree to do something with my friend at 7 a.m. because I don't want to seem difficult. So my PA might think they're being helpful by explaining to my friend why this is difficult, but to allow me to be independent, my PA needs to keep that information private and allow me to make my own choices, even if they make things a bit difficult for me. I would say it's important to expect the unexpected, even if it rarely happens. So, for example, if I meet someone online, through online dating, for example, which is very rare, but I might want to invite them to my home, and I would want some privacy. And because this is so rare, then I think my PAs wouldn't necessarily expect it. But what I really don't want is somebody to barge in through a closed door into my room because it's time for me to take my medication when I'm clearly wanting privacy. So I think it's, you know, it's just about being ready for anything, really, and being ready for things to be different, and make sure you're giving privacy and dignity at all times, because you never know when it might be really important.
One of the areas that I can think of an example is when I go out with my friends, I need my PA there because I still need to like have help with drinks, help going to the bathroom. But I don't necessarily want my PA to be part of the conversation, and actually me and my friends might be talking about things that are amongst mates. We might even be talking about controversial things that if you have a different opinion on, you might not go down so well. So I think again it's like asking that person like how's the day going to run? So you're going out with your mates, like where do you want me to be? What do you want me to do? Things like taking a step out of the conversation. Now in places like a bar or a restaurant where you've got to be in sight of somebody, that's quite difficult to remove yourself from that situation. It might be that the person can message you when you need them and you go and sit in a nearby coffee shop or go for a walk or a wander around the shops or so. But if they need you closer to that, one of the tips things that my PA does is almost like goes and sits further back or sits like away slightly on the next table. Maybe even gets their phone out and starts busying themselves or reading a book so that it's clear that they're not part of the event and steps themselves away from that. That's probably a kind of a good example of where you can support that person having their independence with their friends or family or maybe work colleagues, but not being part of it.
Establishing and maintaining boundaries is crucial for fostering a healthy and productive relationship between a PA and their employer. John Hastie and Ross Hovey, both experienced in employing PAs, offer valuable insights into their approaches to setting boundaries and cultivating a professional yet supportive dynamic. Their experiences underscore the importance of clear communication, mutual respect, and understanding each other's needs.
So I try to be clear with my PAs about boundaries that are important to me when they first start, when I'm explaining how I like to have things done. I think also often the new PA might shadow an existing PA so that they can kind of learn the typical routine, they can learn how I like to have things done and how to protect my privacy. I don't think I always get it right. I think sometimes I rely on common sense assumptions a bit too much. So, I might rely on the basis that if someone sees a closed door, they're going to knock, but maybe not everyone else thinks that way. So I think it can be difficult sometimes as a PA to know exactly what to do, which I think is why you should always ask questions.
Setting boundaries with your PA is really tough because I think when you are, severely disabled and you have a disability such as muscular dystrophy or spinal muscular atrophy, you are so reliant on that person doing everything for you, and you create that working relationship and getting the best out of each other often means that the boundary between being an employer, an employee, and a friend is a really hard one to strike because you spend so much time with the person.
So it's important to communicate as clearly as possible right at the outset with PAs about how you want to maintain privacy and other boundaries. I think, though, you probably won't be able to remember everything, and there are always likely to be misunderstandings at the beginning. I think it's important that you address any misunderstandings as soon as possible so they don't become recurring issues. Don't just let things go, because eventually you're going to be annoyed by it. And I think if you change your mind about something, that's perfectly okay, but I think you should be patient and calm when you address this with a PA. So, if there are issues with boundaries, I think it's often best to sit down together and talk about these rather than try to address the problem in the heat of the moment.
I think the other thing is as well is remembering that this person is relying on your help. So, for example, it may be that you're helping someone with something like a pay slip, and you're getting very privileged. You're getting access to very privileged information a lot of the time. I think the key part is that you need to remember that information is something you need to almost forget. It's nothing that you take outside of your work. It's not for sharing. It's for your role. You need to probably treat it like if you were like a police officer or a nurse. That what you see in the workplace stays in the workplace. You don't discuss it with other people.
Unfortunately, there will be times when boundaries might be crossed or are at risk of being crossed. Here are some examples of situations where this may happen.
A good example of where a boundary might be crossed is when maybe you are attending a social event with your PA, and because you might feel, I don't know, it could be a concert, it could be a wedding, it could be a celebration. Maybe you feel a little bit guilty at the fact that they're at work and everybody else is drinking and having a good time, and maybe you've got transport arranged, and maybe you might say to your PA, look, I don't mind actually, like you can have a glass of wine, like, and I'd like you to feel welcome and part of this. I don't want you to feel like a sort of like stand out like a sore thumb. But then actually that might set the precedence, or that might allow one glass to become two glass. That person actually isn't therefore necessary in the best version of themselves to do the job. And that's something where the boundary can be crossed. I think another boundary that can be crossed is, again, the nature of this work is that sometimes you might be going out for dinners, or you might be going out, getting some food when you're out somewhere, and maybe the PA goes, "Oh, let me buy you that cup of tea and that cake," or something like that. And those are really nice things to do, but then it kind of like might put in an awkward situation where you, as the employer, feel you've got to return that favour. And I think just sometimes keeping that really clear, like, segregation of those things, and kind of, whilst you might want to do that thing and make them feel really welcome, it's really thinking about the long-term impacts of that.
Yeah, I think because PAs are working in the home, it's often easy to forget the usual etiquette there would be in a place of work. I think in terms of privacy, a boundary that can commonly be crossed is where I'm maybe either doing work or I might be doing something personal on my computer, and I ask something from my PA, so they have to come and they'll be standing by my computer. And I think it's also tempting to just look and start reading what's on the screen, and I think that's a boundary that's very easily crossed. And yeah, if I was uncomfortable with that, I would probably just shut down what's on the screen.
In this module, we've looked at the key privacy and dignity aspects that PAs need to be mindful of when supporting their employer, the strategies that PAs can use to maintain dignity, privacy, and confidentiality, how PAs can ensure that independence is not affected when maintaining privacy or confidentiality, how to set and maintain boundaries in the PA-employer relationship, and potential situations where boundaries might be crossed.